I knew my mother-in-law hated me, but I didn't think she would ever try to hurt me. My name is Jessica, and I've been married to my husband, Brian, for 4 years. He's the kindest man I've ever met, funny, smart, and always calm under pressure. But his mother, Patricia? Oh, she was a whole different storm. She never liked me from the start. Not because I was rude or lazy or didn't love her son. Nope. It was simply because I wasn't the woman she picked for Brian. That's right. She had a whole list of suitable women from her church and local country club, and I didn't fit into that perfect little box. Still, I tried. I really did. I baked cookies for holidays, hosted dinners, and even helped clean her house when she had back pain. But no matter what I did, Patricia always found a way to insult me with a fake smile on her face. She'd say things like, "Oh, Jessica, you're so brave for wearing that color. Not everyone can pull it off." Or, "Brian must love simple food. I guess your cooking is simple." Always with that high-pitched, sugary voice. But nothing could have prepared me for what she did at the family dinner. It was a Sunday evening. The whole family was at her house. Brian, his dad, Mark, his two sisters, their boyfriends, and me. It was supposed to be a special dinner because Patricia was celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. The table was decorated with golden candles, fresh roses, and her best china plates. The mood seemed light. She even smiled at me, which was rare. Then she brought out the drinks. "Homemade sangria," she said, handing each of us a fancy glass. A toast to love, family, and 40 years of sticking it out. Everyone cheered and raised their glasses. But something felt off. As I took my glass from Patricia, I saw her give me a quick side glance. It wasn't warm. It was cold. Calculated. I've seen that look before from people who were trying to hide something. I brought the glass close to my lips, but didn't sip. I just sniffed it. Something was off about the smell. It wasn't just wine and fruit. It had a bitter edge. My stomach flipped. Then, I saw her eyes flick toward me again. This time, her smile was wider. So, I made a quick decision. While everyone was distracted by Brian making a joke about Mark's awful fishing skills, I slowly leaned over and swapped my glass with Mark's. I did it smoothly, like I was just adjusting my seat. Patricia's eyes were still on me, but when she saw me raise Mark's glass to my lips, her face dropped. Just for a second. Then she quickly looked away. I didn't drink it, though. I only pretended to sip. Mark, however, took a big gulp and said, "Wow, this one has a kick to it." 10 minutes later, Mark started looking dizzy. And that was the moment everything changed. Now let me take you back to the beginning, so you'll understand why my mother-in-law would do something so horrible. It all started the day Brian told his parents we were engaged. I'll never forget that dinner. We were at a steakhouse, and the second I said, "We're getting married," Patricia's face froze like someone had thrown cold water on her. Mark congratulated us, but even he looked like he was hiding something. "Jessica," Patricia said, gently placing her napkin on the table. "Marriage is a huge step. Are you sure you're ready?" Brian squeezed my hand and said, "Mom, we're happy. That's all that matters." From that day, Patricia made it her mission to make me feel small. If I wore a new dress, she'd say it looked comfortable. If I cooked a nice dinner, she'd claim it needed a little more seasoning. She even once told Brian that I was probably just with him because he's stable and easy to control. I tried to talk to Brian about it, but he always said, "She's just old-fashioned, Jess. She'll come around." She didn't. A few months into our marriage, Patricia started showing up at our house without calling. I'd open the door in my pajamas and she'd say, "Oh, I thought you'd be up by now." In my day, women had the house cleaned before sunrise. She would accidentally throw away things I'd leave on the kitchen counter. My recipe cards, shopping lists, even a pair of earrings she claimed looked too fake to be real. Once, I found her in our bedroom, looking for the bathroom. Still, I stayed kind. I smiled through it. I believed that if I showed her enough love, she'd come around. I even invited her and Mark over for dinner once a week, just to make peace. It never worked. Then, last summer, we had a small cookout with family and friends in our backyard. I wore a sundress, modest, pretty, nothing wild. But when Patricia saw me, she whispered, loud enough for others to hear, "She really likes attention, doesn't she?" I pretended not to hear, but that night, I cried in the shower. Brian tried to defend her, but deep down, I think he knew his mother was going too far. Now, back to the dinner party. Mark was swaying in his seat. His eyes were heavy, and he looked pale. "Phew, maybe I drank too fast," he mumbled. He stood up, but almost fell into the sideboard. Brian caught him. Everyone rushed over, panicking. Patricia rushed to his side, too, pretending to be concerned. "Oh, honey, are you okay? Maybe it's your blood pressure again." But her eyes kept darting to me. Mark sat down, took a deep breath, and started to sweat. "I feel dizzy." I looked at Patricia, and this time, I didn't hide the anger on my face. She knew.
She knew I knew.
I stood up quietly and walked to the kitchen, where I found the empty pitcher she had used to pour the sangria. There was still a little left at the bottom. I poured it into a mason jar, sealed it, and tucked it into my purse.
Just in case.
When I returned to the table, Mark was drinking water and resting. Patricia kept rubbing his back and playing the innocent wife, but her hands were shaking. Brian pulled me aside and whispered, "Do you think something's wrong with the drink?" I looked him in the eye and said, "I think someone wanted something to be wrong." The rest of the evening was awkward. Mark slowly got better and blamed it on a long day and strong wine. Patricia acted sweet and helpful, but she didn't make eye contact with me again. Not once. Later that night, after we got home, Brian asked again if I noticed anything weird.
I told him what happened.
"I think your mom spiked my drink, Brian." His face went pale.
What?
"Why would she? She didn't expect me to swap glasses with your dad." Brian sat down, silent for a long time. "I'm going to find out what was in that drink," I said quietly. "And I'm going to make sure she never gets away with this." What I didn't tell him yet was I had a plan, and it was going to make Patricia wish she never messed with me. Because the next step, it was going to shake that entire family to its core. And it all started the moment I handed that mason jar over to a friend of mine who worked in a lab. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying Patricia's smirk, her calculated moves, and the way her smile faltered when I swapped glasses. I wasn't just angry, I was hurt. Deeply hurt. Because no matter how much I tried, no matter how much kindness I showed her, it had never been enough. But now she had crossed the line. I woke up early the next morning and called my friend Madison. She worked at a private toxicology lab and we had been friends since college. I trusted her. I didn't even need to explain much, just that I suspected something was added to my drink and needed it tested discreetly. She agreed, told me to drop it off at her apartment before noon. I handed her the sealed mason jar and simply said, "Text me when you have something." She nodded and promised to keep everything between us. As I walked back to my car, I already felt the fire building inside me. I wasn't going to let Patricia get away with this. Not this time. When I got home, Brian was waiting for me in the kitchen. "Where did you go?" he asked. I paused. I took the drink to a friend. "I need to know what was in it, Brian." He rubbed his face and let out a long sigh. "Jess, I know my mom's been awful. But poisoning? That's serious." I looked him straight in the eye.
Exactly.
"So, let's stop pretending it's not." He didn't argue after that. He knew. Deep down, I could tell. He knew his mom was capable of this. 2 days later, I got the text from Madison.
"Jess,
It tested positive for zolpidem. That's a prescription sedative. Strong dose. Someone wanted you knocked out hard." My heart dropped. Zolpidem. That was the stuff in Ambien. It could cause drowsiness, blackouts, even confusion and hallucinations if mixed with alcohol. If I had drunk it, I would have passed out, maybe even worse. I felt a mix of rage and relief. Rage that she had really done it. Relief that I had trusted my gut. Brian was speechless when I showed him the message. He sat quietly on the couch for a long time before whispering, "She could have killed you." I didn't respond. I was already thinking ahead. Now, here's where the less extreme part of the story slips in. I didn't storm into their house. I didn't scream or accuse anyone yet. I waited. Instead, I called Mark. I said, "Hey, just checking in. You feeling okay after dinner the other night?" He chuckled, a little embarrassed. Yeah, I'm fine. Guess I just had one too many drinks. I'm not as young as I used to be." Then I said gently, "Mark, do you remember if your drink tasted odd?" There was a pause. You know what?
It did.
It had this weird bitter aftertaste. Patricia said maybe it was from the fruit soaking too long. Why? I smiled to myself. No reason. Just checking. I hung up and leaned back in my chair.
So he noticed it too.
I had my proof. And that's when I put my plan into motion. You see, Patricia was throwing another family event, a weekend brunch at their house. It was one of her traditions. Fancy napkins, tea sandwiches, fresh fruit salad. Everyone had to show up in their Sunday best. This time, I showed up early. Earlier than anyone else. And I brought a little surprise. I walked into the kitchen like everything was fine. Patricia looked startled when she saw me.
Oh.
You're early. I wanted to help, I said with a smile. You always do so much. She blinked. Well, I suppose the napkins could use folding. I brought juice too. I added quickly. Freshly pressed. Organic. Thought I'd make some for everyone. I could see the suspicion on her face, but she didn't say anything. I pulled out the bottle of juice, poured a bit into a cup, and handed it to her. Try it. Tell me if it's sweet enough. She took a sip, nodded slowly. It's fine. I nodded, too. Great. But that wasn't the real juice I was planning to serve. Once she left the kitchen, I took the real bottles, identical looking, and poured them into a separate pitcher I'd brought from home. I made sure it was untainted, just clean orange juice. But I had marked one glass subtly on the rim with a tiny scratch. I set the glasses out for the brunch, but I made sure the one with the scratch was in her usual seat. Brian was the only one who knew what I was doing. I had told him everything and made him promise not to intervene. Just trust me, I had whispered. It's not what she thinks. Everyone arrived. Her daughters.
Mark.
The boyfriends. People chatted, plates clinked, and food was served. Then, when the time was right, I stood up and said, "Before we eat, I want to say something." Everyone looked at me, even Patricia. I held up my glass. To family, and to being able to trust the people we sit at the table with. They all raised their glasses. Then I locked eyes with Patricia, and only then did I say it. Oh, and just so you all know, someone at this table tried to drug me at the last dinner. But I swapped glasses. And now I know who it was. You could hear a pin drop. Patricia's face drained of color. Mark looked confused. Brian kept a neutral face. And then the worst thing happened. Mark stood up and knocked over his glass. He was trembling. What did you say? I calmly repeated myself. I was supposed to drink a sedative. But your glass had it instead. You drank it. I had the drink tested. There's proof. Gasps went around the table. And that's when Patricia snapped. You can't prove anything, she shouted, standing up, face red. You're lying. Trying to ruin this family. She's manipulating you all. I stayed calm. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail I had left for myself that night, as soon as we got home after dinner. It was my own voice, saying what happened, naming the drug, the lab test, the suspicion. Time-stamped. Then, I pulled out a printed email from Madison, sealed in an envelope. Test results, I said, laying it on the table. If anyone doubts me, have it checked. Mark picked it up, looked at Patricia, and said nothing. But then, the ultimate twist came. Mark turned to Patricia and said, in front of everyone, "Did you do it?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. I was just trying to keep her in line. She's too bold. She needs to know her place. Mark stepped back like he'd been slapped. Brian stood, grabbed my hand, and looked his mother straight in the eye. You could have killed my wife. That was the end of brunch. Patricia's meltdown was explosive. She screamed, cried, begged. But no one backed her up. Not even her daughters. Her boyfriend's girlfriend said, "You always were a control freak," and stormed out. Mark packed a bag that night and left the house. But that wasn't the last twist of the day. As I was gathering our things, Patricia followed me to the front porch and hissed, "You think you've won? This family will never be yours." I looked at her and said calmly, "It never was about winning. It was about making sure you never hurt anyone again." Then I closed the door behind me. But little did I know, Patricia had one more card to play. And what she did next would turn the entire situation into something none of us ever expected. 3 days passed in silence. Sweet, uneasy silence. Brian and I stayed at a nearby hotel while Mark made arrangements to stay with one of his brothers across town. Patricia's house, once the family's central gathering spot, now sat cold and quiet. Nobody was calling her. Nobody was coming over. And then, right when I thought things were over, the bomb dropped. We were packing to leave the hotel when Brian checked his email and froze. His face went stiff. "What is it?" I asked. He turned the screen to me. It was a message from the HOA board, the homeowners association of our neighborhood. Patricia had filed an official complaint against me. According to the document, I was being accused of intentionally spiking a drink to cause harm to an elderly family member and creating a hostile domestic situation. "She twisted the story," Brian whispered, jaw clenched. "She's telling people you're the one who drugged her husband." I couldn't believe it. My heart pounded so loudly, I could barely think. "She's framing me," I said slowly. It all made sense. Patricia knew her perfect little image had cracked, so now she was spinning it back in her favor. The HOA was just the beginning. She still had friends on the board, old poker buddies, and church friends who respected her. And now, I was the villain in her story. But what she didn't know was I had receipts.
Literally.
I reached for my phone and called Madison. "I need a signed copy of the test results," I said. "And I need it notarized." "No problem," she replied. "You want the full documentation?" "Everything. Chain of custody, timestamps, photos, whatever can't be denied." She emailed the report by evening, and I printed out a full file. I attached the voicemail again, and I even included a screenshot of a message I had received from one of Patricia's neighbors, who admitted she overheard Patricia bragging weeks ago about putting Jessica in her place. I didn't just file a response to the HOA. I sent the entire package to every board member individually. Then I forwarded it to Mark and Patricia's daughters. Then, just for good measure, I sent a copy to Patricia. She didn't reply, but the HOA did, and they weren't happy with her. Apparently, Mark had also filed a statement by then, admitting that he was the one who drank the drugged wine and confirming the drink had not been his. When they pieced everything together, they realized Patricia was lying. She was trying to use the HOA to damage my name and possibly get us kicked out of the neighborhood. Instead, the board publicly censured her. They issued a formal apology to me and warned her that any future false complaints could lead to her being removed from the board entirely. Now here's the less extreme part, because despite the chaos, I still wasn't trying to destroy her life. I just wanted peace. So I backed off. I didn't press charges. I didn't sue for defamation or emotional distress. I could have, but I didn't, because I knew something worse was already happening. Patricia's mask was slipping in front of everyone. Neighbors who used to adore her were now whispering behind closed doors. Her friends stopped inviting her to their fancy brunches. Her church group leader called me privately to say how sorry she was for the pain you've endured because of a jealous woman. And Mark? He didn't go back to her. But just when I thought things were winding down, another twist came. One afternoon, while I was making lunch, Brian's phone rang. He answered on speaker. It was Patricia. "Brian," she said, voice trembling. "I need to talk to you. Please come over." "Alone?" "No," Brian said flatly. "Please," she begged. I need to tell you something before it's too late."
He looked at me.
I shrugged. It was his call. After a long pause, he finally said, "Fine. But Jessica is coming with me. That's non-negotiable." There was silence. Then she whispered, "Okay." We drove to her house slowly, not knowing what to expect. When we got there, the living room lights were off and the curtains drawn. Patricia was sitting on the couch, pale, and looking like she hadn't slept in days. We sat down across from her. The silence stretched. Then she did something I never thought I'd see.
She cried.
Like, full-on sobbing, shoulders shaking, mascara running. I didn't mean to hurt you, she choked. I was scared. I blinked. Scared of what?
She looked at Brian.
Of losing you. Her voice cracked as she explained. After your father's heart scare last year, I kept thinking about how everything was changing.
You were spending less time with me.
You didn't call as much. You had your own life. And then Jessica, she's so confident, so capable. I knew you didn't need me anymore. Brian looked stunned. I said nothing. I just watched. I thought, Patricia continued, if I could just get her to stumble once, just once, you'd come back to me. You'd need me again. I finally spoke. So you drugged my drink? She couldn't meet my eyes. I thought it would just make you sleepy. Maybe embarrass you. Just for one night. I didn't think Mark would drink it. I didn't think it'd go this far. I sat back, folded my arms. You put my life in danger. You humiliated yourself. And now you're alone. She wiped her eyes, nodded slowly. I know. I deserve it. Then she looked up at me. I'm sorry, Jessica. I'm sorry for all of it. I was wrong. So wrong. Brian said nothing. His face was unreadable. And I just nodded. Because here's the thing, sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's not about screaming or breaking things or taking someone to court. Sometimes it's about sitting calmly across from the person who tried to ruin you and watching them realize they've ruined themselves. We left her house quietly. And that night, for the first time in weeks, I finally slept well. But just as I was drifting off to sleep, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. She's not done. Be careful. I bolted upright. Brian turned to me. What is it? I showed him the message. And we both realized Patricia may have apologized. But the war might not be over. The message kept me up all night. She's not done. Be careful. I stared at the screen, reading it over and over. There was no name, no number I recognized. Just those 6 words, sitting there like a quiet threat, or a warning. At first, I wondered if it was just a prank, some random person trying to mess with me after everything had gone public. But the timing was too perfect. Patricia had just apologized, admitted what she'd done, sobbed in front of us like a broken woman. But was that all an act? I showed the message to Brian, and he stared at it with tight lips. Could be one of her friends. Maybe someone in her circle is upset you exposed her. He wasn't wrong. Patricia had a long history of being the perfect socialite. To some people, she was still a saint. Others probably couldn't handle seeing her image fall apart so publicly. But something about the message felt closer than that. The next day, I decided to go to the police station. I wasn't looking to press charges, but I needed them to at least log the incident. I gave them the full story, the drug drink, the toxicology report, the voicemail, the brunch confrontation, and now the text. The officer on duty, a kind woman named Officer Torres, listened carefully. She said, "You've got evidence, and this text makes it a little more serious. I'll file a report. If anything else comes up, contact me immediately." I thanked her and left, feeling only slightly better. That same afternoon, I got a call from Mark. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he said. I moved into an apartment. Filed for a legal separation. My eyes widened. "You're really leaving her?"
He sighed.
"Jessica, when I drank that wine and got sick, I brushed it off. But after you told me everything and the test results came in, I couldn't stay. I looked back at the last 10 years and realized I've been excusing a lot of her behavior. I enabled her." I sat in silence, letting his words sink in. He continued, "And one more thing. I think you need to check the garage. At the house. There's something I saw a while back, but didn't think much of. Now, I'm not so sure." My skin prickled. "What do you mean?" She had a little storage cabinet.
Locked.
She never let anyone near it. I assumed it was old photo albums or family stuff. But I peeked once. There were pills, Jessica. Bottles. Labels scratched off. A heavy chill ran through me. You think she's done this before? I asked. Mark hesitated. I think maybe she's planned things like this before. I just didn't want to believe it. After we hung up, I knew I had to see it for myself. That evening, with Brian beside me, we drove back to Patricia's house. She wasn't home. We confirmed it by calling her phone and hearing her answer from some cafe across town. So we let ourselves in using the spare key we still had. The house was quiet. Too quiet. We went straight to the garage. Just like Mark said, there was a small wooden cabinet tucked behind a pile of Christmas decorations. It was locked with a tiny silver padlock. Brian found a screwdriver and gently pried the hinge until it popped open. And inside, there were at least 6 small bottles. One labeled Ambien, another with a label that had been blacked out. One still had a pharmacy sticker with Patricia's name on it and a prescription date from last year. There were half-used packets of sleeping pills, unmarked vials, and a few syringes. I felt sick to my stomach. She was planning something, I whispered. This wasn't just about me. She's done this before. Brian stepped back, staring into the cabinet like it was a box of nightmares. We need to show this to the police, he said quietly. We took photos of everything. Every label, every pill bottle, every piece of evidence. I didn't take the items. I wasn't going to touch them more than I already had. I just wanted records. I emailed everything to Officer Torres within the hour. Less than 2 days later, she called me back. You did the right thing, she said. We're opening an investigation. It's still early, but I think you're not the only one who may have been a target. I froze. What do you mean? Officer Torres lowered her voice. Her old neighbor filed a complaint last year about a tea party that made her violently sick. It was dropped for lack of evidence. Another woman from her church said she blacked out after a dinner and thought she'd just had too much wine. These were considered isolated.
But now?
Now, your case opens a new door. I hung up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Patricia wasn't just a bitter mother-in-law. She was a dangerous woman. A woman who had possibly been drugging people to get her way for years, silently, carefully, never enough to kill, but just enough to control. And I had been the one to finally bring her into the light. A week later, the police raided her home. They confiscated the cabinet, her prescription logs, and even her laptop. Patricia wasn't arrested, not yet, but they put her under investigation and restricted her from contacting me or Brian directly.
But revenge?
That came in a different form. Her name was published in the local paper under a small heading, Local Woman Under Investigation for Alleged Drugging Incidents. The HOA removed her from the board permanently. Her church suspended her volunteer activities.
Her daughters stopped visiting.
Mark filed for divorce officially that month.
And Patricia?
She moved out of town. No goodbye. No apology. Just silence. Now, months later, I still get chills thinking about that dinner. How close I came to drinking that poison. How that one decision to swap glasses changed everything. People ask me if I regret exposing her. If it made my life too messy. If I'd do it again. And my answer is always the same. I didn't just stand up for myself. I stopped someone from hurting others. Because sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't in yelling or suing or ruining someone's life. Sometimes, it's in protecting your own, while making sure the truth finally sees the light. And in the end, Patricia's own darkness swallowed her whole. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like this video, drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in Jessica's shoes, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more jaw-dropping stories like this one.